advanced. The minister has in her possession legislation is causing major discomfort for residents in some villages. We have received reports that the names of so-called non-Amerindians are being removed from voters' lists in some villages. In many reported cases, persons of other ethnicities living in villages for more than 50 years, married to indigenous spouses, their union producing children and grandchildren, watch on in horror as village councils post voters' lists from which their names have been deleted. This is electoral fraud. The PPP government is causing serious division in villages. Massive disenfranchisement is taking place. Families are now embroiled in conflict over exclusion from the electoral process. Children of indigenous and mixed parentage can no longer participate in the electoral process. PPP operatives now have no regard for their indigenous lineage and the definition of the word resident in the legislation. Over in Campbelltown in Region 8, former Tushau Marbel Thomas, who was unlawfully removed from her elected office soon after the PPP assumed office, has again been a target of Pauline Sukai. Ms. Thomas told her story on social media. She claims that after being nominated, seconded, and having her name placed on the list of nominees for the position of Tushau, the returning officer received a phone call. Following that call, Ms. Thomas alleged that the returning officer removed her name from the list of nominees. She alleged that the returning officer explained that he had received instructions that caused him to remove her name. This is unlawful and a manifestation of the dictatorial nature of the PPP. The PPP must allow the residents of indigenous communities and villages to elect their leaders of their choice and allow returning officers to function independently and not be dictated to by the PPP politicians. Marbel Thomas satisfies Section 71 of the Act in its entirety. Notwithstanding her unlawful removal from elected office, she did not present herself as a candidate in the election immediately following her removal. She was never convicted of any criminal offense. What then is her crime? Only Pauline Sukai can enlighten us as to the reason or reasons for Marbel Thomas not being eligible to be a candidate for the Campbelltown village election. Vindictive is a word that springs to mind because the minister seems not to care about the massive allegations of corruption on the part of some elected officials whom the PPP supports for re-election. Pauline Sukai must tell the indigenous population of Guyana the reason some villages enjoy 1 month between nomination and election dates, while others have only 1 to 4 days in some cases, and in others, both nomination and elections being conducted on the same day. In some cases, the tradition of holding elections on Sundays to facilitate the full participation of villagers who work outside of the village is now being discarded and conveniently abandoned. These village elections in 2024 are laying bare the PPP desire for total domination and control of the indigenous Guyanese population. The indigenous peoples of Guyana reject in the strongest terms the PPP's unrelenting campaign to exercise total domination and control over their very lives. Region 1 residents dissatisfied. A recent visit to Region 1, Barima Waini, revealed that with all the talk about investing large sums of money in the region, the people in the region are not seeing value for money. They complain that across the region, the People's Progressive Party is only focusing on their friends, their families, and their favorites, and neglecting critical work that needs to be done in the region. At Barmita, people complained that there is no facility for the police who deal with immigration to do their work. They bemoan the fact that people checking in and out of the village have to use a storage facility with little or no furniture to book in and out. Residents are requesting that the government build a proper structure for the police immigration section to do their job. Citizens also complained that the school is overcrowded and demanded that the school be built to facilitate the children so that they can learn in a comfortable environment. It was also noted that the school has more than 500 children with only 13 teachers. More importantly, The secondary school has over 140 children with 3 teachers only. In addition, they pointed out the need for living quarters for teachers. In this modern era in oil-rich Guyana, there's little or no access to the internet using Wi-Fi. This affects both teachers and students and should be addressed by the government because internet access is necessary for the far-flung communities. Many senior citizens in the area are demanding that the government put arrangements in place so that they can receive their pensions in their village, since it costs them huge sums to go to Port Kaituma to collect their pension. The senior citizens contend that the pension is already inadequate, and when they are compelled to travel long distances at high costs to receive their pension, it affects them financially and physically, since the travel in itself is burdensome because of the bad roads and it impacts them financially because they have to pay their way to collect the very small pension they receive. Residents reminded the visiting team that under the APNU AFC, they receive their pensions in their village. Persons in the region are contending that there is need to decentralize the distribution of passports, since it costs them a lot to travel out of their community to obtain passports. This proposal has been endorsed by many who contend that one of the reasons for the decentralizing services is to ensure that they are accessible to all residents wherever they find themselves. Residents also condemn the infrastructure work being done in the region as shabby, unprofessional, and a waste of taxpayers' money. At Port Kaituma, residents showed us the poor work that was being done on a wharf being built by the government. We were able to witness that the wharf has already cracked and is sinking. Clearly, the government and the people of Region 1 are not getting value for money. At Barabina, the Mabruma sub-region, a bridge under construction has already washed away, and remedial actions were being taken when the leader of the opposition and team visited the site. There is deep concern all across the region that many of these projects are just avenues for corruption and putting money in the hands of PPP friends, families, and favorites. Thank you.
Thank you. And I will open for questions on the president.
Police station overcrowding at schools.
Mr. Harris, I think you have to start over because we didn't hear exactly when you started. Clearly.
All right. I was saying, good morning, Mr. Williams. You were speaking about the situation in Region 1, Matthews Ridge, Mabaruma. And one of the things you said, well, that poor police accommodation, overcrowded schools. But sir, in another quarter, I learned of I learned of shabby construction, a road scaling also collapsing. Exactly what is happening in Region 1 and what can the opposition do? So the government to ensure that when contracts are awarded, especially in the outlying area.
Region 1, like most hinterland regions, seem to be a haven for the PPP's corrupt activities. They believe that citizens are not alert enough and are not vigilant enough, and they hope that the parliamentary opposition will not visit those communities and examine what's happening. Unfortunately for them, unfortunately for the citizens of Guyana, the opposition is very, very visible in those communities and is working among the people. Apart from the shabby infrastructure, The government recently in Port Kaituma commissioned a boat for $3.5 million to take children to school. In 3.5 weeks, the boat was no more. This boat was commissioned by a minister of government. And when it was being commissioned, someone took a video recording of the inside of the boat and the leak. The boat was leaking so profusely, you wonder whether it was not, in fact, a condemned vessel that was being handed over to the people. Our activists on the ground in Port Kaituma spoke of and took us to a facility which he says costed $35 million to be constructed. It is a poultry rearing facility. And the residents of Port Kaituma said to us, the place never even saw a chicken. So these are the kinds of things that are happening in the outlying regions. And I'll tell you, Adam, that in Barometer, when we came to government in 2015, the Barometer school was the most underpopulated school, perhaps in the entire region, if not the entire country. And the APNU AFC government put in place a hot meal kitchen and all the associated amenities. And the school's population grew to what it is today, 500 at the primary level. This is what the opposition in government can do to transform our society, building sustainable communities instead of simply awarding contracts for the benefit of the elite. Another example is the quality of roads that are being constructed in the region. The roads built by the APNU AFC in both Matakai and Mabaruma, and to a lesser extent in Moruca, are still standing solidly, while the roads recently constructed by the PPP contractors are collapsing. The wharf in question, the sheet piling revetment was put down there and the land was backfilled. When the revetment started to lean into the river, they had to go and excavate the soil from behind the revetment and pull it back using steel bars. In the process, the cracking of casted concrete became evident. Beyond that, the warehouse facility is much smaller than the administrative building, when in fact Port Kaituma is a place that a lot of cargo is transported to. So you can see not only incompetence, the absence of vision, and the desire to see, the absence of the desire to see the communities grow and prosper, but you're seeing blatantly that projects, physical infrastructure projects, are being used to enrich people and to pauperize the citizenry. And therein lies the problem. The solution is the removal of the People's Progressive Party from government and the returning of the APNU AFC to solve the problems of the country.
Could I add, Adam, one of the things we have been doing, which is what we're doing now, is exposing what is actually happening in these regions. The second thing we're doing is, as we go, we are building networks so that we can be provided with the information so that we could continue to expose them and to get members of parliament to ask questions in parliament, etc., to bring pressure to bear to the People's Progressive Party. It is also dependent on organizing people in the community so they themselves can take political action on the issue. So it's a process of raising consciousness, organizing people, and exposing the government's behavior.
Questions on the press statement?
I want to talk about the election. These elections, I suppose, are supervised by the Ministry of Marine Affairs, I think they call it now. Why are there different in every Amerindian community?
Firstly, the village elections are not supervised by the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. The Ministry of Amerindian Affairs is required to fulfill certain functions. For example, the publication of the voters list by 60 days before the date of election is something that the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs is required to ensure happens. And they have to do that in consultation with the incumbent village councils. However, the actual management of village elections is supervised by the returning officers who are identified in the Amerindian Act as the REOs, the regional executive officers of the regions within which the village falls. So, for example, there's one Amerindian village in Region 4, that's in Cuthbert's Mission, and therefore the returning officer for that election will be the REO Region 4. The same for Regions 3 and 5, which have only one Amerindian village each. When it comes to the variation in the rules, that's where the political interference steps in. That's where the desire for the fulfillment of the PPP's policy of total domination and control comes in. I believe one example will suffice. If you take Monkey Mountain, for example, in Monkey Mountain, the chairman of the PPP's women's group is the mother of the Tushao. She's also the mother of the district development officer, DDO. She is also the mother, in fact, the mother-in-law of the PPP's group chairman. So there's that web of family dominating. So the Tushao is controlled by the People's Progressive Party. If you look at regions 7 and 9, for example, you will find that there is on average a full month between the date for nomination and the date for election in these village elections 2024. If you go to St. Cuthbert's Mission, you will find that 3 or 4 days separate the nomination day from the election day. And if you go over to Region 2, you will find that the nomination day is on one day and the election is on the following day, the immediately following day. In some of those villages in Region 2, both nomination and election will be taking place on the same day. These schedules are worked out by the Ministry of Amerindian Affairs. These schedules are not left up to the returning officer to determine in consultation with the villages. This is where the political interference takes place. This is where the PPP exercises its authority over the people whose elections it supported and facilitated in villages. And this is the reason you have disparity in the treatment of the process in various villages. For example, again, I'll say to you that in some villages, traditionally, the election was set for Sundays so that people who are working outside of the village can go home and participate in the process. On this occasion, in some villages, they have moved the elections from Sunday to Friday when people have to work. That again is a violation of the Amerindian Act because it says that absence from the village for purposes of education or employment shall not be considered as absence. Therefore, you are required to facilitate the involvement of such persons in the process. So the entire process of village elections 2024 need to be scrapped and need to be revisited with a view to ensuring that the Amerindian Act is complied with in every respect, and that democracy prevails, and good governance is respected. Pauline Sukai went to the United Nations Permanent Forum on Indigenous Peoples, and you know what she said? I'll quote her. Firstly, Guyana's indigenous peoples, known also as Amerindians, enjoy the same fundamental rights and freedoms as all Guyanese under the Constitution. Their collective and specific rights are further secured under the Amerindian Act, which addresses inter alia governance, land rights, sustainable use and benefit sharing of natural resources, and the preservation of cultural heritage. This is what is being told to the international community. This is what is being told to the United Nations. The practice home here by Pauline Sukai and the People's Progressive Party, as you can see, is directly opposite to the international utterances. It's a betrayal of the people of this country.
Questions on the press statement?
This is Dennis Shabalier, the Williams. Mr. Williams, can you say, in light of the concerns you've raised about the preparation for the village elections, whether any legal action will be taken by your party on behalf of the interested persons and councils there to seek a remedy?
This is under active consideration.
Is there a time frame in this?
At this time, no.
Follow up to Dennis. Active consideration by whom, sir?
By the,
Yeah, go on.
by the opposition, parliamentary opposition.
You take your position seriously when in the past we have asked similar questions and you have given us similar answers, but there has been no legal action taken.
Well, Dennis, I don't know specifically what you're referring to. I don't know that we have discussed, you and I have discussed legal action. I don't so recall.
Any other questions on the press statement? Right, I'll open the floor.
Yeah, so,
Go ahead. Mr.
all right.
Harris.
I was going, leader, with all these things happening, how is the opposition presence in these communities? Since obviously the people want help.
Like I said, it's a process of building teams in those villages. We are now getting information from the villages in a more timely fashion. In fact, a lot of times because they don't have internet access, you find difficult. But we have been engaging and putting a number of persons in place who are sending us information. And not only in the Amerindian villages. For instance, we have information right now that the PPP is putting the police in line with the sole purpose of saying to them, don't wear uniform, but we want you to protect the people at our Congress on the East Coast, which is in a total violation of the law, which should not be done because it is for partisan purpose. But that information would have come to us yesterday. I spoke about it when I spoke to the journalists at the Labor Day rally, but clearly we have to sensitize people to it. You're aware that we have already said that the police has been politicized and have a police commissioner who can think independent to the government. And so the only thing here is to really bring it to the attention of the public and to ensure it is in the public domain. My understanding is some policemen have already begun to seek out. But really and truly, the problem is they should not be using the Ghana police force to protect party persons at the Congress, but that's the direction the PPP will go. So we are improving the mechanisms to get information and get it early so that we can act.
I'm opening the floor for any other questions. Ms. Williams.
Mr. Thornton, good morning, Trina Williams, Canada, Virgo. How do you view the Richard Burke's, sorry, how do you view Mr. Richard Burke's and Mark Benchcroft's statements when they called for a boycott of those Guyanese-owned businesses within the diaspora because they simply embraced the president? And do you believe that this action is contrary to constant activism in support of the development and progress of the Afro-Guyanese community?
Well, first, Rickford Burke and Mark Benchop are in the diaspora. They know what is happening in the diaspora, and they will make their decisions as they think fit in the diaspora. It is not for us to decide whether it's correct or incorrect for Rickford Burke and Mark Benchop to take whatever position they want. Neither the two are members of the People's National Congress Reform. They are individuals who act, and if they feel that that is the way to go, then they're free to do that.
Okay. Follow up to that. I know you just mentioned that they are not members of the opposition, but however, they
Never
align.
said the opposition, members of the
Sorry.
political party.
Sorry. However, they align themselves with certain.
I didn't hear that.
They align themselves with certain notions that this party calls for. So I'm asking, as the leader of the People's National Congress, do you support this? Because again, these are Guyanese-owned businesses, and even recently, Benchcroft had threatened to bring this boycott to local businesses right here in Guyana.
If it necessitates bringing it to local businesses, I see no problem. Look, as I understand what was happening, is that the PPP went into Brooklyn and he had some photo ops, and whatever they did, they got some businesses to accommodate him. We in Guyana are concerned that the government is oppressive and to accommodate an oppressor. We in Guyana are concerned that our resources are not meeting the people, and they're using our resources to go all over the world mobilizing support. Now, as it relates to the treatment of Afro-Guyanese in Guyana, it leaves much to be desired. Apart from using some to achieve their own objectives, they have been very, very discriminatory in practice. And if Rickford Burke and Mark Benchop believe that the way they could help the struggle in Guyana is by calling for a boycott, that is their right. Now, the fact that they support the party in some issues and disagree on other issues is also their right. And so I do not intend to prevent them from exercising their right. What I can say to you is that the information before the United Nations just recently suggests that the government is discriminatory in nature. It suggests that it's a wicked political government. It suggests that they're using the resources of the government to oppress people. If they believe that that is the approach they should take, they should feel free to take it.
And I would even add that I believe that there should be organizations and governments should set preconditions to engaging the People's Progressive Party. One, restoration of the original Natural Resource Fund legislation, putting in back all the safeguards, all the oversight, and making it mandatory that projects that are funded from oil resources are specifically identified instead of just lumping money into the consolidated fund, and you don't know what the oil resources are funding. Secondly, restore funding to IPADG. Thirdly, apologizing for the brutal demolition of homes of the people in Mocha, Arcadia, and the displacement without alternatives to the vendors in and around the city of Georgetown. 4, repairing the damage done to the indigenous population when carbon credits were sold without their knowledge, consent, or approval. and arbitrarily determining how much money, what percentage of those monies must go to the indigenous communities, and identifying their own cronies who will manage it as well. So there must be preconditions, in my view, for entities and foreign governments to engage before engaging the leadership of the People's Progressive Party. Guyana is the fastest growing economy in the world. Guyana has one of the highest rates of poverty in this part of the world. The resources are not reaching the people, and they're not reaching the people because of the discriminatory allocation of resources for the benefit of the 1% in this country, while the other 99 wish that they can get crumbs.
Let me also add that this government has trumped up charges against many Afro-Guyanese. Calvin Heath London is facing a trumped up charge. I think Trevor Ben is facing a trumped up charge. Carol Joseph, Alden Lawrence. We can name the whole list of African Guyanese who are facing trumped up charges by the People's Progressive Party. And therefore, the People's Progressive Party is showing that it has no interest in the African Guyanese community. And if people in the diaspora believe that they support businesses and the weapon at their disposal is to withhold their business so that they can bring pressure to bear to this government to stop doing some of the things they're doing, I see no problem with it. Jack Deo actually said for less than that, people must chase Granger out of villages when we were in government. So let us not make this some moral issue in which we try to make Ben Shop and whatever. I have heard so many times people talking about these issues, but they do it in a biased way. Until now, there's no justice for Quindon Bacchus. Until now, there's no justice for Boston in Essequibo, who the police went and shot in his bed. Why is it we should have a problem if people say boycott a business because this government is oppressive, this government is in total violation of the law? Why should we be given a photo up to a president who is presiding over a brutal regime against the people in this country? Mocker, look, some simple things. When we left government in 2020, there was being built a track and field, the track in Linden, one in New Amsterdam. 4 years, this government cannot complete it. And there is no doubt the athletes that will benefit from that in the main are the African Guyanese athletes in Linden and New Amsterdam. The government is going to proceed now to build a stadium in Berbice. While they can't finish that track, this government has shown clearly that it is racist by nature. Region 10 needs agricultural development. This government refuses to develop an agricultural plan and put it in place in Region 10. This government, therefore, any action that we can take to ensure that they're held accountable and that they don't get the opportunity to palm-possess themselves, we will support it. This government needs to be dealt with.
Okay.
And I'm sorry. Last evening on the Glenn Lal show, there was a diplomat from Palestine who was calling on the world to boycott certain businesses, making the point that if you buy particular products, and you can see where the good lady was going, you were contributing to the murder of Palestinians. I don't hear an outcry about her call for boycott. And some of the businesses that she's referring to are franchises in Guyana, operating in Guyana. I don't hear an outcry about that. I don't hear an outcry about Mr. Jagdio's comments regarding Justice Kissoon's ruling. I don't hear an outcry that says Mr. Jagdio was wrong to label Justice Kissoon presumptuous because of the decision that he handed down that wasn't favorable to the People's Progressive Party. So if we're going to examine these issues, I'd recommend very strongly we look at it from both sides as well.
And let me add as well, when you're giving 6.5% to the public service, you know what you're doing? You are essentially saying, in the main, the average man out there can't get more than 6.5%. Why would anyone want to be having picture ops and allowing the PPP government to go on like if they like the people of Guyana? They do not. You have money to put in shows. If you add up the money they put in these shows, it could pay the teachers. But you are refusing to pay the teachers, in this case, of all ethnic groups. Because one of the characteristics of the last teacher strike is that it had indigenous people, it had Indians, it had African Guyanese. You went to court. The court ruled in the teachers' favor. This government and its presidents want to have a nice time with ordinary people. Decided they are going to court to challenge a decision that is in the interest of the people. What is wrong with people who believe that this government has overdone it? Who believe that this government, many elements of its approach is racist? What is wrong with this government that has been exposed at the United Nations for its discrimination? What is wrong with boycotting when this government withdrew the support from IPADG?
And Critchlow Labour College.
Well, let me put Critchlow Labour College in a corner by itself. There's an old one. Tell you more recently, you withdraw it. What you are showing, and then you not only withdraw it, you're creating paper African organizations. So you could possess yourself with Africans and going on like if you are supportive of the interests of the African Guyanese. I have said to them, and I repeat it here, if the government is as good and should be dialing up, let them release in the last 4 years how much land they give to African Guyanese who have applied, etc., and how much land they give to their friends, families, and favorite who happen to be of the same ethnicity as them. So don't let us paint Rickford Burke and Mark Benchop as two villains. They are part of a political process. Sometimes I will agree with them, sometimes I wouldn't agree with them, but they have the right. You want to run down the streets and protest? If you want that, that is also a right. But they have chosen the option of saying to people, look, this government is dictatorial. This government is racist. And if we put money into the people who support them, we are supporting the oppression of Guyanese. I see no problem with that.
I just want to make a quick point on that note, though. It is, I think, really critical for us to call this out for what it is. We have a president who's all about photo ops. Now, again, you see the president here cooking, presumably in this kitchen, but the president is not wearing a hairnet. And so I don't know who is eating food from this president when the president is not taking basic safety, basic protocols in mind. And to me, really, what you've seen is frustration that has grown because the president's focus is on all these photo ops, focus is on PR. But when it comes to substantive issues, the president is nowhere to be seen. You don't even hear him commenting on really critical issues. Rather, you hear Vice President Jagdeo commenting on everything, but the president is typically silent. And when he does comment on an issue, the comment that he makes is so ridiculous that it is shocking even to foreign media personnel. Will remind Guyanese that when the president was asked about what his government is doing for the cost of living crisis, containing inflation, he said that they're preserving the forests. Folks, we have to call this out for what it is. It is a president who is focused on show. And I can understand if people don't want to eat at a restaurant where there are people cooking who are not following safety protocols.
And I know that you went on extensively to say that basically that this government is practicing discrimination, that if one wants to boycott these businesses that supported this government, then as they should. However, several of your party members disagree with this stance of boycott, and I will quote German Figueroa, who spoke about this same discrimination allegations and called for a multifaceted approach to these allegations. Do you not think that before taking such a large step to boycotting, as he said, we own businesses, stifling them, we should not, take a more multifaceted approach, as he said, to these allegations?
Well, a multifaceted is a loose concept. Unless you see what are the facets, it's a very loose concept. Now,
engaging policymakers, he said, advocating for policy reforms and supporting grassroots.
We advocate for policy reforms. We engage the policymakers on the Guyana-Venezuela territorial controversy, give them our support. They refuse to engage us. You talking about engaging? They refuse to engage the trade union. The law says that collective bargaining is a right. What multifaceted approach you can take if the person who you're engaging has no interest in the development of the people of this country, or very little interest? German Figueroa has a right to his view. Whoever else, they have a right to their view. It doesn't follow that their view of the party's policy position. Since they wrote in their individual capacity. But I'm saying to you, we have to look at the wider political struggle. And in this political struggle, we have got to analyze every element of it and formulate our position. You were talking about engaging the policymakers. I engaged the president, wrote him saying, look, we need a chancellor and a chief justice. He had the audacity to write back to say he will deal with it when he feels like dealing with it. That's the essence of the letter. Why do I engage an incompetent person who basically doesn't understand his constitutional responsibility and rides a pomposity to say to people, I'm not going to deal with it. Now I can deal with it when? The judge in the last ruling said that this is an urgent matter that should be dealt with. That's more than 3 months ago. What am I engaging him for? We have engaged at the policy level, but the government's approach is this. We're in crisis with Venezuela. We can engage. The minute the crisis appears to have subsided, you ain't engaging. Government's approach is domination and control. They have no scope for engagement on policy, etc. We have produced many ideas on how to deal with the cost of living. The government doesn't. We pointed out that people linked to the government are smuggling chicken into Guyana, destroying small chicken businesses. instructing the people at the border in Lethem to allow them to pass. Then they come to Guyana, they take it out of the Brazilian pocket, put it in a plastic and sell it to Guyanese as if it is local chicken. You cannot engage a corrupt government that has no interest in proper policy formulating. Let us understand, this is the president that told an international journalist when he was asked about the plan for Guyana, he just make up the plan as he go along. How do you engage a man who has no plan? He can make up the plan as he goes along. And then he stays in a corner and Barra Jagdos come in front and lie like when horse trotting. You can't get anything of truth from him. How do you engage people in policy when they have no interest? Let me remind you, probably too young to know, but let me remind you, under Robert Corbyn, the PNC decided they were going to engage the government. You engage the government. Produce what was called constructive engagement, a document with certain commitments. The government abandoned it the minute we were back in Parliament and they felt comfortable. This government is not a government that is willing to discuss policy. We recommended to them when we were doing the Ghana-Venezuela chapter, let us put in place a bipartisan commission that can look at the issues and deal with it. The government rejected it out of hand. We are supposed to be members of a foreign relations advisory committee. The government waits until the day before the meeting. The minister calls me to say, well, we got a meeting. No, not the day before, the same morning. Are y'all invited to a meeting? No. Well, they got a meeting at 3. The cowboy tongue they're running. You do not get involved in policy formulation with people who are not policy oriented. They do everything in a political framework to ensure domination and control. They know nothing about good governance. You are talking about a government. Since 1957, we have had a public accounts committee. And that public accounts committee, 3 members, regardless of which side they came from, constituted a quorum, which meant that if the government doesn't turn up or the opposition doesn't turn up, the public accounts could be scrutinized. This government went and changed the law. He debated against it. It was my first debate as leader of the opposition. We pointed out the problems with it and the pitfalls of it. The government paid no attention. They proceeded to change the law. Having changed the law, just what we said they were changing the law to do, they did. When they don't want a public accounts committee, they don't turn up. And so over 40 sessions were not held. This is not a government that is showing any interest in engaging the opposition on policy formulation and implementation. So a multifaceted approach is probably the approach that is needed, but you need a government that is responsive to the concerns of the people.
For clarity, Mr. Norton, I know that you mentioned that Figuera and others, they can have their own opinion on this matter. However, you did say that they're not speaking on the party's approach or
party's behalf. Behalf is the word you're looking for. I think behalf is the word that he said.
The party's behalf, sorry. And they were speaking in their individual capacity. Could you clarify what you mean by that? Are you saying that?
Simple and straightforward. Though you might be a member of parliament or a councillor, if there's a discussion on the issue in the party and the party takes a position, then that's a party position. If you out there and you talk on it, you can speak on it in your individual capacity. The party is not binding to your position. A political party is a combination of people, many of whom will have different views. But when you meet and you bring together your views and you have a position, that's a party position. Our constitution provides for the leader of the party to make pronouncements on these issues. And so I'm saying to you, there is no harm in Figueroa pronouncing. He has the right as an individual. But his pronouncements are not the pronouncements of the People's National Congress reform.
Thank you.
Very convincing Mr. Figueroa is unequivocally and unambiguously self-supportive of the People's National Congress reform.
What is that? I didn't hear that.
Are you convinced that Mr. Figueroa is unambiguously supportive of the PNCR?
I don't know how that become an issue. His support was not questioned. Said that nobody said that. All we're saying,
I'm not saying that anybody said it. I'm asking you.
as far as I know, Mr. Figueroa is a member of the People's National Congress reform. He's a parliamentarian. Further than that, I know no more. But what I'm saying and making very, very clear, an individual can take a position. They have that right. It doesn't follow that the position they would have taken is the position of the party. That's the point I'm making.
I see the hand of Ms. Rennie.
Good morning, everyone. Renee Sandwich with Future News. Mr. Norton, how concerned is the opposition about the recent revelation of the US $12.192 billion inflated invoice submitted to the Guyana Revenue Authority by Ramps Logistics on behalf of Exxon? Also, what do you make of Exxon's response stating that it's a typographical error?
First, I would say this. I don't believe big companies make that kind of typographical error. So, but Exxon has to defend its position. That is their right. I have continuously said that we are entitled as the people of Guyana to benefit from the oil agreement. Therefore, anything that seeks to cause us to lose will not go down well with us. And in that regard, therefore, we have serious problems because we believe every cent that we're entitled to should come to the treasury of Guyana.
Just to build on that, I'm looking at this matter where I believe it's something like 8 million US that is the level of inflation of the costs here. This really underscores what we've been saying all along about us ensuring that we have robust auditing capacity, because it is if something like that is missed and it ends up being something that is cost recovered, that's a significant loss to the Guyanese people, and therefore something that we should be very concerned about. We've mentioned that we believe that international auditors should be engaged and they should work closely with the GRA to ensure that we have proper auditing. And we've also mentioned that there needs to be, and it is spelled out in the PSA, that the only costs that can be recovered, and it's across various categories, are costs that are reasonable and competitive costs. And so obviously a cost which is, something which is listed as triple what its cost really is not going to be a reasonable competitive market cost. Those are the types of things that auditors must also be looking for, not just looking to see whether or not costs qualify as in the categories of cost recovery, but looking closely at that so that we ensure that Guyanese are getting what they really are supposed to be getting. This is an incident where a lot of money was involved, but it is of course possible there are other incidents. We would not know that, however, without having appropriate audits that are robust and that protect the rights of Guyanese. And so that is what we will ensure is in place when in office. You will of course note that while in office, we hired IHS Markit for the first audit, which is an international firm. And we will continue to focus on building that kind of capacity, because over the course of the life of the oil industry, if we have audits that are not robust, it could be tens of billions of US that are lost. This is just one particular incident that highlights some of the risks that we're facing here.
I see the hand of Mr. Mark Benchcomb.
Thank you, Madam Moderator. And I'm not going to respond to the reporter from Chronicle, neither would I accuse any reporter of Chronicle of being pro-PPP and sending a PPP propaganda message. I will stick to the subject matter of boycott. Mr. Aubrey Norton, what's your position, please, on businesses that have been boycotted by the PPP? Mr. Jack Dill himself said that the cultural news should be boycotted not so long ago. He said that Starbucks News should be boycotted, and businesses that are connected to the opposition should be boycotted as well. From a personal standpoint, I know that during the COVID-19 pandemic period, media houses such as Ben Shop Radio was part of a group that, not initiated by Ben Shop Radio, but we were part of a group. And the objective was to say to them that during the pandemic, they have given hundreds of millions of dollars to their friends in the private sector commission. And so media houses should be given some sort of relief. They have refused to do that to Ben Shop Radio or any other radio stations or TV stations they consider to be anti-government. They consider to be anti-government. So how do you feel about that direct boycotting of Ben Shop Radio and other entities and other businesses in Guyana that are not carrying the line of now becoming so concerned as though boycott is something that is new, when in fact it is Jack Dill and the PPP who have always been telling this boycott business in Guyana for a long, long time. Thank you so much, and I will listen, and I'm certain that my friend from the Chronicle, and again, I'm not accusing her of being a PPP supporter because she works there.
Boycott has always been a tool in politics. In politics, you set your objectives and you use various tools to achieve them. I don't know of any political party that worth its salt that didn't use boycott as a tool. Of course, you have to analyze the situation and decide. And let me put some context here. If government was a government that was treating Guyanese properly, I would have said boycott is not a tool that should be used because there was scope for you to use other mechanisms. But like I said before, the government is not treating us properly. And therefore, boycott is one of the tools that we will have to use to achieve our objectives. Whether it comes from Ben Shop or it's not the issue. The issue is we have a situation in Guyana where the government is daily becoming more and more dictatorial, where they're using fear, instilling fear in people, in which they are telling people, even if you see talking to an APNU person, look, this government has removed artists from benefiting because in the last election they did work for the APNU. Have effectively boycotted a number of artists merely for their perceived affiliation, because many of those artists sell their skills. You get a good ad from them, you use it, you pay them. This government has transformed them into enemies and ensured that they are boycotted. They have no right to speak anything about boycott. Barry Jack Dill was on record of saying what will happen with Christopher Gale when he engaged in Linden. Look, I don't have time to waste on this whole issue of boycott. if people believe it is a useful tool to bring the PPP to book, boycott it. I make no qualms about that. You know what is interesting? It is suddenly some people know that is your own. I know we're talking about is your own. It is businesses that provided the opportunity for a rogue dictatorial PPP government to appear in the international world as if they are decent, law-abiding people who doing what should be done. And they aren't. And so those who oppose them have the right to use any tool that is within the confines of the law. I don't know that boycott is illegal. Boycott is a tool that has been used by Barra Jagdeo, by the PPP, way back before even Barrett got into politics. I recall there was a time when the PPP was boycotting banks, DIH. People forget that. There was a time when Dr. Jagan and the PPP called for the boycott of NIS. Don't pay any NIS. They said, in fact, it is not NIS, it's sin.
Don't plant race.
The Jagdeo told businessmen after we came to government in 2015 that they shouldn't invest while the APNU was in government. That is a boycott. So you're not talking to a politician who come into politics 4 years ago. I have fairly good institutional knowledge of the atrocities of the PPP, including the use of boycott. What do you think the PPP did when they used to burn cane? When they were burning cane, they were sabotaging Gaisuku. That is worse than any boycott of a business. So let them bear the chafe. The PPP's big problem is that the discrimination is not only ethnic, it is political as well. And so even Indo-Guyanese, I don't want to get into what they're doing with a young Indo-Guyanese woman in Linden who they can't control and who is being seen in the regional structure and they're bringing people and put ahead of her. I could give you the whole list of the atrocities of the People's Progressive Party. They should not cry for a boycott. They shouldn't even ask a question about a boycott. All they need to do is look into their own history and they will see that they were the boycott kings.
A quick question on that. Was there a PPP presence during the Indian talk?
Well, they obviously boycotted it because they didn't turn up. And it's not the first time. So I don't understand them talking anything about boycott.
And the Prime Minister's from Linden, is
The Prime Minister who is from Linden was invited and he just couldn't go. He master say he can't go, he can't go. That's the reality. So don't let them talk about boycott. They boycott the city council in Georgetown by refusing to give them the resources to govern the city. They go into communities where the AP and UAFC are the elected representatives, say nothing to them, just proceed and do their own thing. Boycott? Boycott is part of the PPP, and they should not cry at all, because that is their approach. And in this case, the people in New York decided that the people in Guyana are being oppressed and they shouldn't allow the president to come and possess himself. I have gone to those bars. In fact, I think at one time they put up a picture with me at one of them bar and put it in a negative light that the opposition leader was at, I don't remember the name, Doris. I was there. And they put it in negative light. But now you're gone presenting yourself as if you are supportive. If Mark Benchap and Bork want boycott, let her go ahead and boycott. The two of them can't boycott. It is the people that to boycott it. And if they say to the people boycott, and like a journalist said, it's affecting the business, well, then it means the people agree with them.
Any other questions?
Shanika, just one more note. I was waiting for a question, but it didn't come up. I saw today that there is a government advisor who's indicated that 15 billion barrels of oil reserves is what Guyana really has. Of course, we've seen the government refuse to publish the latest figures regarding Guyana's oil reserves. And we've seen even that one of the operators' partners has indicated one of the finds is 740 million barrels of oil, which is more oil than the entire country of Ghana has. And it seems to me to be really be highly unlikely that of the 7 other finds, you don't have a few 100 million barrels of oil, which would take you to more oil not being revealed to the people of Guyana than even Equatorial Guinea, which is an entire country that we talk about a lot when it comes to corruption, that is being hidden from the Guyanese people. One of the things we want to point out, though, because we're seeing the vice president really try to maneuver around this topic by saying that it is not about reserves, it's only about production, is we want to highlight that we need to know the entire reserves of this country to be able to properly plan for the future. And it is really something that I think differentiates us from the PUP, because we don't just plan for oil reserves that we have found, we plan for oil reserves that we might find. So that when we do find those reserves, we are able to put in place or able to quickly implement policies, adjustments, and improve what we offer to the people of Guyana. To me, this is just a classic example. The vice president's disinterest in additional oil reserves is really a classic example of the PUP not having any idea about how to plan. Any first-year economics students would tell you that consumption smoothing means that you need to know what your future cash flows will be like, and that you can that it would be beneficial for you to be able to increase your consumption based on your investment, based on those higher cash flows. If we know that we have more oil revenues, we know that we'll be able to have more cash flow in the future, and therefore that we can adjust what we offer to the Guyanese people and provide them more benefits and really invest in them in new ways. This also means, however, that we have to look at the type of jobs that we're going to be offering in our economy, because a larger sovereign wealth fund, more reserves, more money, larger sovereign wealth fund would imply a different type of economy. In Saudi Arabia, as an example, almost no Saudis work in sales and as waiters and so on. And that's, of course, because their economy is very wealthy and it impacts the nature of the jobs that Saudi citizens would typically take. So to me, this is just an attempt by the government to dodge really proper planning, but also it is critical to note that it seems that the government is afraid to even deal with these increased reserves, because one, it will increase Guyanese's demands upon them because they believe, and rightly so, that they're entitled to more. But two, it means that they seem to be shy of, given that you have more reserves, engaging with the operator, better contract management and these types of things. And surely those pressures will come from us having more oil reserves revealed. We've indicated already that they could be hiding as much as $195 billion worth of oil reserves, which I don't know about you, but that is a truly astonishing figure. What we're seeing from our government advisor today is even more than that. And so the government needs to stop hiding and properly address this issue. Thank you.
I want to comment on oil. I think the first thing the government needs to recognize that this is a nationalist issue. The United States want to benefit from what it has. Barbados want to benefit from what it has. Any government that has the interest of its people at heart will do everything to ensure we know how much reserve they got. It's garbage to separate reserve from production. Production is come from what reserves you have. So it's Jack Dew's folly. The issue here is the government is unpatriotic. We got to look after the interests of Guyana. We welcome investment. A contract was done, an agreement was done. It is our task to ensure we benefit. I don't see what Exxon has enough resources at its disposal to defend itself and its interests. I don't know why the PPP government believe, unless they're involved in some kind of illegality, that they have to defend a company that is more powerful than our country in large measure. And so I'm saying we welcome investment. Exxon resources are coming to Guyana, unfortunately not to the people because of the approach of the government, but we as Guyanese have an obligation to do everything to ensure the people of Guyana benefit. And so anything that will allow us to know what is the true situation will be welcomed by us and will be pursued by us. And I just want to make one last thing about boycott. You know, the TUC used to have one rally in this country. And the PPP pulled away fitter, created what? And since then they've been having two rallies because they boycott the TUC rally. What are they telling us about boycott? Boycott is interwoven into the fabric of their approach to everything.
At this time, I do not see the hands of anybody else, so I think there are no more questions. Just before we go, I want to once again, on behalf of the party, wish all our grade 6 students who are currently writing the National Grade 6 exam all the best today and tomorrow in those exams. And that all they have learned will put their best foot forward as they move forward into the secondary schools come September. Thank you. I want to thank all our media personnel and viewing audience for joining today's press conference. Do have a wonderful afternoon.
Yeah, my name is Jacinti Caldata Francis Wakenham, and since 1965, I become a voter, and I always place my X next to the cup. And what they are doing today, I can't take it. So I have no more vote to give to PPP anymore. I'm not going to vote anymore no more. If they have to lose by one vote, they're losing it by data.
Oh, Jesus Christ, if cost of living double, I don't know what happened. A pound of sugar is $300 already. Flour, everything gone up. Everything just raising. You gotta get about $40,000 for buy good ration. You gotta get 3 man now. A weekend man, a monthly man, and a fortnight man.